my top tips for the new FPL season in today's video with 5 top 10k finishes back to back. We are hopefully going to give you a few pieces of advice and things I've learned along the way to hopefully get you a good finish, win your mini leagues, or even get inside the top 10k as well. What is up, everyone? FPL Harry here. Before we dive in, 2,000 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you are new around here as well. And welcome back for another video. It's only the third video during preseason. As I posted on all the socials, thank you very much for being a little bit sort of considerate and putting up with the slightly less content. I have moved destination. I am having an incredible honeymoon. I think this might be the last video I record until I get back home. So it's going to be a little bit more of a quieter week. But once we get into August, there'll be a video every single day. I'm promising you this, and I absolutely will carry through with that. So stay tuned because we've got some really exciting things in store. Thank you all for the kind messages. And let's dive in. Just before we get into some of these top tips, a bit of housekeeping. The first thing that we are going to have a look at, of course, is the mini league. We have officially launched the new charity mini league for this season. The code is up on screen now. There is a link in the description down below. Please make sure you get in there before game week 1. Unfortunately, I don't do prizes and that sort of stuff for my mini league, but what I do is try and raise a bit of money for charity. 10p this year for every single one of you who finish inside the top 25k will go to charity. Last year, this would have meant I donated about £500, and we're expecting the league to get bigger this year. In previous seasons, what we did, we had a league code, and if you beat me, then I donate money to charity. But that meant that if I had a good season, I donate less money, which didn't really seem like the right thing to do. So in theory, if all of the top 25,000 managers joined this league, we'd be donating £2,500 to charity. So make sure you're in it. Hopefully have a good season and you can contribute to me donating a bit of money. The next thing to talk about is a couple of new signings. Victor Gyökeres is now officially in the game and has signed for Arsenal. 9 million, just to discuss that, I think is a good price. I don't think he's guaranteed that he's definitely going to start game week 1 for Arsenal, particularly when they've got Kai Havertz and we don't know quite how many games he's going to play going into pre-season. But it is one we're going to keep an eye on, the price and the amount of minutes he gets, because if he gets enough minutes and looks set to start game week 1, he can make a mockery of that price. So he's one, not in my draft at the moment, but I'll be keeping an eye on it. The other one now is Alexander Isak. He may well be moving to Liverpool. Of course, with Luis Diaz leaving, Liverpool now have a bit more money, and both of these signings, particularly if Isak goes and Gyökeres is at Arsenal now, could put up a whole big shaker to our FPL plans. Although I've not recorded loads, I'm hoping that actually all the early preseason content is not going to be that beneficial, because we're going to get 2 huge makers and shakers in FPL in Gyökeres and maybe Isak going to Liverpool. Let's see if that second one does happen. But in today's video, we're not really talking about drafts. We've done a little bit of that recently. What we're going to do is dive in and talk about a few of the top tips that I have for playing this game. It is a new season. There are rule changes. There's lots of stuff going on. Now, I have finished in the top 10k for the past 5 years. So I am hoping that there might be a little bit of something to learn. Hopefully I've learned a little bit of something over those 5 seasons that I can give to you. Now, there are a few disclaimers. These are my opinions. Unfortunately, you're not going to agree with everyone. Every opinion is not going to be the same. I do play FPL a little bit more cautiously. I play a little bit more boring. I play a little bit more template. And some of the advice that I will give during this video is going to be a few of those things. And you might not agree with that. And that is absolutely fine. There will be, as I say, exceptions to every single rule. There'll be people in the comments saying, I finished this rank and I didn't do any of these things. And that is absolutely fine. This is just what I feel like I have learned over this sort of time and over the course of the past 5 seasons to hopefully get myself the ranks that I have achieved. And the other thing is, if you are aiming to play this game to finish first in the world, and that is all you care about, this is probably not the best thing for you. Now, it's probably not the best thing to say at the beginning of a video, but if you're trying to win FPL, you have to be different to other people. You're not going to win FPL by having a team filled with the same number of players and the same selection that everyone else has. If that's what you truly want to do and you only care about winning it, and if you finish second or lower, it's completely irrelevant, then you probably need to go a little bit differential, and this video is not going to be completely for you. As I said, these are my opinions. This is what I feel like I've learned with those ranks over the past 5 years. Hopefully I can display a few of that to you as well. Now, the first thing we're going to talk about is something different, and we don't normally talk about this in advice videos, but the first one is to take advantage of the rule changes. Now, actually, when the rule changes came out, we've got defensive contributions, we've got the African Cup of Nations transfers and the double chips. People were not particularly happy with some of the changes that people were making to the game. But They're going to be there whether we like it or not, and you have to take advantage of them. There'll be people who don't take advantage of them in their own individual turn. And if you know from the start of the season how to take advantage of these changes the best possible way, that is really going to help you get a good start. And we'll talk about the start of the season being really, really important. So defensive contributions, knowing how you might impact the defenders that you're looking to pick. It also might mean that you're picking more centre backs over going with fullbacks. It also means you might be more inclined to start a defender in a difficult fixture over maybe one in an easier fixture, just because of the defensive contributions that someone like a Murillo or Tarkowski can rack up in an easier fixture versus in a difficult fixture versus an easier fixture. Might mean you don't need to rotate your defenders quite as much, but being able to pick up and look at some of the data, like the defensive contribution table on Fantasy Football Scout, again, 47% off, link in the description if you want to go and check it out. I have been scrolling through that. Some of the players in my draft, I will have a new draft video out probably on Friday or Saturday this week as we begin the daily videos. I've been scrolling through that, trying to pick a few players. Anderson of Nottingham Forest, Neco Williams of Nottingham Forest, both of those ranking much more highly in that than I thought they would. Understanding that and having the tool like on Scout, for example, to understand that is really important. Next up is the African Cup of Nations transfers. Again, this was really unpopular, but we've got to know how to take advantage of it. I don't think I'm going to use it with the way that they are sort of marketing it to take out the players for African Cup of Nations. I'm hoping to get to that time of the season and actually be able to save all of those transfers to the point where we get to game week 24 onwards where there are doubles. And if I can roll all of those transfers to that point and keep 4-5 in the bank for when we get doubles announced, that will put me in a much better position rather than using it. I'm seeing people saying, oh yeah, I can take out, those African Cup of Nations players and maybe we need it to sell Salah. But people are saying they're going to use it to play their bench boost, but I don't think that's the best use of it. And the next one is chips. Chip strategy. People think double chips, it just makes it easier. The less engaged managers can just play the chips earlier on and get more points. But if you can really maximize the bench boost, particularly the free hit and the wildcard and the triple captain in the first half of the season, you can see how much in the second half of the year playing your chips well can give you an advantage. But if you play them well in the first half of the season as well now, you basically get double the advantage. As we get closer to game week 1, we will have a specific chip strategy video. At the moment, bench boost in game weeks 1 to 3, but particularly 1 to 10. Free hit game week 6, wildcard 11, 12 or 13, and triple captain after that is looking like the early popular strategy because of fixture swings and stuff like that. I do think bench boosting before the wildcard is going to be the big play to not have to worry about it once you do play your wildcard. But we'll discuss it all in a bit more detail. But do really think when you're building your drafts, don't just build a draft you're happy with. Build a draft with chip strategy for the early season in mind because it could give you a massive boost for the start. And then just leading on from that, the start of the season is so important. People often, go out of the blocks flying, try and be a bit differential in game week 1 because they say, yeah, but I could be in the top 10K by the end of 3 game weeks and look where I'd be. That is true. But realistically, you're not going to win FPL in the first 4 or 5 game weeks, but you can lose it and you can lose your mini leagues. You can lose the season early on if you have a really bad start. Now, you might not lose it after 5 weeks, but you'll spend game week 6 to 10 trying to claw back the ground that you've lost. And I often say at the beginning of the season, and my team, particularly at the start of the season, but also depending on what my rank is, can be a little bit template and can be a little bit boring. But I think not falling behind early on in the season is much more important than potentially trying to throw yourself ahead, trying to get into that top 10K really early on, but then also risking falling down. I would try your best to not put yourself in a position where you can get really unlucky. I do this when I play, and I know some people will disagree and think, Harry, this video is basically telling people to be boring. It's not, but if you're 50-50 on a decision, don't put yourself in a position to be unlucky early on in the season because it's much more difficult to try and claw it back than if you're just steady at the start of the season. The beginning is so important, and particularly with the 5 free transfers, it's even more important because the people who start well enough are not only going to be above people in the ranks, they're also going to be in the position where their team is good and then they're rolling transfers as well. So they're going to get to the point where they're ahead of people and then they've got more transfers in the bank, 4 or 5, which is just then even more important again. Now, following on from that, the 4-5 transfer rule makes hits even less important now that we've got 4 or 5. Because when we had only 1 or 2, there were quite often times where you'd only have 2 transfers. And if you ever wanted to make 3 transfers, you'd have to take a hit. But the amount of people who are now getting to a position where they've got 2 transfers. And previously in FPL, if you had 2 transfers, you'd basically be forced to make a transfer. Now you're not forced to make unnecessary transfers if you don't want to. So now we have the ability to get to 3, 4, 5. Hits are becoming even more rare and even less likely to be needed. Now, once we get to doubles and blanks and you have additional fixtures or less fixtures in play, they start to become a little bit more important. But again, planning is really important here, because if you can get to the doubles and blanks with 4 and 5 transfers, whereas everyone else only has 1 or 2 and are taking hits, hits are much less beneficial. The number of hits people have been taking now that there's 4 or 5 transfers have definitely gone down. We're seeing less doubles because of the FA Cup weekends as well. There's much less certainty on hits. Every hit you take, you're effectively sacrificing a goal, which is an awful lot to sacrifice in a specific game week. So do your best to try and roll a few transfers and avoid hits as much as you can. Of course, if you've got injuries, you've got suspensions, it's a blank game week, you can't put out a full 11, then yes, they are worth considering, but just be a little bit cautious that they are less beneficial than they have been. I actually think FPL should make hits cost less, maybe -3, just to try and get them back into the game a little bit, because we're seeing so many people avoid taking them because of how much they are costing at the moment. Next up, captaincy is key, and we talk a lot about captaincy on this channel. People think they should remove it from FPL altogether. People think that they should do a rule where you can't captain the same player for 2 consecutive weeks. They should do a rule where you can only captain a player maximum of 10 times during a season. And that is particularly for this. The most expensive players are the most expensive players for the reason because they score the most points, and normally they are the most consistent as well. I really, in my opinion, captaincy is not for the differentials. Have differentials in your team who are 10, 20% owned, and let them be differential enough in your starting 11. There are certain times during the season you can go against a Salah, you can go against a Haaland, but I think everyone watching will know more times where they've gone against it and it's gone wrong, and they've gone against it and it's gone right. Again, particularly early on, if you're 50-50 and you've got a differential that you really like, just let the differential be a differential. Those high price, high captain players are often those things for a reason, and they often do best, as I'm sure all of us have learned the hard way over the past couple of seasons, particularly with Mo Salah. Next up is a couple of things. It's about the players that we are picking. Nailed players regardless of ownership. At the start of the season, particularly now that we've got defensive contributions, if we start in defence, picking players who are going to play every week, like centre-backs, over picking a fullback who might not play every week, is now actually quite a sensible thing to do. You could pick 5 centre-backs. Because they get defensive contribution points, you could play them pretty much every week and not have to worry too much about the transfers. And that's something I'm looking to do this year going into the start of the season. When I do my next draft later on in the week, I've got more centre-backs in there than I did, just because I don't want to need transfers in that area. Plus, they are reliable with the defensive contributions, and with the bench boost, having lots of good options in defence is quite a nice thing to do early on. The second one, so picking nailed players who you know are going to be in the starting lineup. Don't pick players who are minutes risk. There's going to be enough transfers early on in the start of the season where you're wanting to jump on a bandwagon. You don't want to have to be fixing a player in your starting 11 who's also not getting the minutes. Victor Gyökeres is a key example. Let's see how he gets on early on in the season, but I'd be more inclined not to go with him and go with someone like a Watkins, because Watkins and Gyökeres are the same price. Go with someone cheaper, go with someone more nailed, and then maybe go to Gyökeres when we like him, rather than going the other way. And pick a player who is likely to be on the pitch, not just for 70 minutes, but pick a player who's likely to be on the pitch for the whole game. 38% of all Premier League goals are scored after the 60th minute. If your player is being taken off, they're immediately not going to be involved in 40% of Premier League goals. And the next one is pick the players who just score points regardless. If you have a player in your team who is 10% owned, or a player in your team who's 90% owned, if they score the same number of points, you get the same outcome in your total. Don't pick a differential just for the sake of it. Some differentials can be good, and there are great ways to attack with differentials, but don't pick a player just because they're more lowly owned, because points are points at the end of the day. And number 6, and this is just so important, and so many more people are doing it with tools like Plan FPL. You can check the link out in the description. You can do it with other sites. You can just do it on the FPL site where you look at your team for future weeks. I'm using FPL Rotation Planner. Again, that will be linked in the description where you can see your team for future weeks as well. Just have a look and plan your team. So many people will make a transfer. They buy a player who's done well because they've had 3 good fixtures for the past 3 weeks and they've scored in all 3. And now they're playing Liverpool, Manchester City, Chelsea in the next 3. And then they'll be surprised that they blank. Also, have a look at if you're picking 2 defenders. They might be the 2 best 4.5 million defenders in the game, but if they have good fixtures in the same weeks and bad fixtures in the same weeks as well, have a look at how your players rotate, how your goalkeepers rotate, which weeks your team looks bad. Do I need to make an exciting transfer this week, but actually in 2 weeks' time, my team's going to look a little bit weak and I might do with a couple of transfers to make some changes. And if I make a transfer now, it's going to force me in a hit. I just think planning. I plan a lot, and anyone who watches any of my videos over the past few seasons know how much I plan. It is so key to FPL, and it's so key, particularly late on in the season, but now with double chips earlier on in the season as well. It's particularly key now with planning them. Please, during preseason, we've got so long. I think it's almost 3 weeks, 2.5 weeks to the start of the season now. There is so much time. If you're building drafts already, make sure you're planning with them for the long term as well. And the final one is having a look at some common mistakes. We're just going to rattle through these pretty quickly, but these are probably obvious things that I see people making all the time. Don't miss the deadline. You'll be surprised that if you make transfers and you do every week, you change your captain, you change your starting 11, all of that good stuff, 38 game weeks, you will be ahead of quite a lot of people playing this game. Picking differentials for the sake of it, pick the players you think will score the most points regardless of their ownership. If they're 10% owned and you want to pick them because you think they're great, absolutely do it. If they're 90%, also do it. Pick the players who score the most points. Not balancing early transfers versus team news. Now, this is one question I get an awful lot. It's quite difficult to do. Early on, chasing value, I think, is quite important, particularly when we've got midweeks in the first 5 or 6 weeks where there is not loads of midweek football. There's no Champions League. But once we get more midweek football like Champions League and FA Cup, then team news starts to become slightly more important. And if you've got a player who's a doubt in your starting 11, you probably need to wait for the news so you don't make a transfer and then need to take a hit for something else. Wasting your chips. We've spoken about chips. Don't just blow them early, although we've got early chips now, but don't just use them because you think something looks good. Try and have a bit of planning and strategy around your chips. Next up is reacting badly to bad game weeks and making knee-jerk transfers. If you have a bad game week, best thing to do is, at least for a Sunday evening, turn your phone off. Don't go on the FPL app until at least Monday or Tuesday and start to come at it with a bit of a fresh mind. Don't let your football team and your rivalry dictate your decision making. So I'm Chelsea and I've got triple Chelsea in my draft at the moment and I'm trying to decide whether that's really a good idea, but try and put that aside. I see people say, I don't pick players from Liverpool and Manchester City because the club I support, and that's fine. And if you want to play the game that way, that is absolutely fine. And if that's, you have such a rivalry, then absolutely fine. Do as you wish. But for the best ranks possible, I would say you need to forget about the actual loyalties you have in the game. Chasing points, particularly early on, it can be difficult. Try and distinguish between a player who's just a bit of a bandwagon, who's maybe just scored a couple of goals, versus actually a long-term pick. Not much changes between the first couple of weeks. Try and use a bit of historical reasoning as well. Failing to plan and look at upcoming fixtures. We spoke about planning. Please look long-term with your teams. Good players in real life don't always equal good FPL picks. It's slightly different now because we've got the defensive contributions, but normally defensive midfielders like Caicedo, like Declan Rice, are not always great FPL picks, but they're great footballers. So actually needing to have an FPL mind on when you're picking players versus a football mind can be quite useful. And the final one is feeling the need to spend all of your money. If you're making a transfer and you've got 9 million for a midfielder to buy, sometimes the best option might be 6.5 million and just save that money because you might want it in a few weeks for another transfer. And if you buy the 9 million option, you might not be able to buy the next big thing in a few weeks. So don't feel like you've got to spend all of the money. That's probably the longest video of pre-season. Hope it's something useful. Hope there's lots to take away from there. Let me know in the comment if there's a piece of advice that you really like, which one is the thing you're going to take most into this season. But most importantly, leave the one piece of advice in the comments you would leave for someone else starting FPL, or if they've been playing, the big thing that you feel like you're taking into this season, whether it's in this list or whether it's not, please leave it in the comments down below. I'll reply to some, I'll pin some. Any questions you have about your team as well, please leave it all in the comment section down below. As I said, not many videos probably for the remainder of this week until we get to the weekend, and then we'll be back with daily videos. So if you're excited for daily videos, I've promised them for a while and they're almost there. So make sure you have liked, make sure you have subscribed to the channel as well. Make sure you've joined the league code. I will flash it up on screen there. Enjoy your tinkering. There are lots of transfers going on which are changing drafts, and I'm sure your phone is filled with lots of screenshots just like mine is as well. Have a good rest of your week. Thank you all very much for tuning in. 2,000 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you're new around here, and I'll be back again very soon.